Have you ever wondered what became of Tito Ortiz, the Huntington Beach Bad Boy? Once a dominant force in the UFC, Tito was a pioneer of the sport when MMA was still finding its footing. He wasn't just another fighter, he was a charismatic, trash-talking star who made waves and set records in the early UFC days. But nowadays, he's mostly viewed as a meme to laugh at and not as a legend of the sport. So, what went wrong and what the heck happened? So let's start it off at the beginning. Tito Ortiz, born Jacob Ortiz, grew up in Huntington Beach, California. At 19, he crossed paths with Paul Herrera, an assistant wrestling coach at Golden West College. Herrera saw potential in Tito and encouraged him to enroll at Golden West. There, Tito became a two-time California Junior College state champion and an All-American wrestler before transferring to California State University, Bakersfield. Now, although he was not a full-time fighter, he continued to hone his skills, training with UFC fighter and collegiate wrestler Tank Abbott. At 22, Tito stepped into an MMA cage for the first time at UFC 13 in 1997. His debut was an alternate bout, meaning no pay or fight contract. But Tito didn't let that stop him. He took down his opponent, Wes Albritton, in just 31 seconds with brutal ground and pound, forcing the ref to step in. This quick win earned him a spot in the light heavyweight tournament final against Guy Mesker that same night. Now, the fight started off well for Tito. He was throwing heavy hands, forcing Mesker to shoot for a takedown. But Tito defended it and started raining down punches, opening up a cut on Mesker. They had to stop the fight temporarily to check the cut, but when it resumed, Tito went for another takedown. However, Mesker locked in a guillotine choke, forcing Tito to tap and handing him his first pro loss. Now, determined to bounce back, Tito took on Jeremy Screeton outside of the UFC. It was another quick fight. Tito stuffed Screeton's takedowns and unleashed heavy knees and punches, forcing the ref to step in after just 16 seconds. Now, back in the UFC, Tito faced Jerry Bolander, but this time Tito dominated from start to finish, controlling the fight on the feet and on the ground. Bolander showed toughness, but Tito's relentless ground and pound opened up a cut under Bolander's eye, leading to a doctor's stoppage. After the fight, Tito famously shot finger pistols towards Bolander's team, the Lion's Den, signaling that the feud between them was far from over. Now, the tension between Tito and the Lion's Den only escalated. At UFC 19, Tito got his rematch with Guy Mesker, another Lion's Den fighter. This time, Tito was the aggressor from the start, beating Mesker with ground and pound until Big John McCarthy stepped in to stop the fight. Tito then taunted the Lion's Den corner with double birdies, sending head trainer Ken Shamrock into a fury. Now, this set the stage for a title fight against another Lion's Den member, Frank Shamrock, at UFC 22. Frank was the reigning UFC middleweight champion, and he was looking to defend his title for the fourth time. Tito controlled the fight early, taking Frank down and throwing ground and pound. But in the fourth round, Frank reversed Tito, got back to his feet, and unleashed a barrage of punches that forced Tito to shoot for a takedown. Frank locked in a guillotine choke, then let it go to finish the fight with ground and pound, pulling off a crazy comeback win and handing Tito another tough loss. Frank Shamrock then left the UFC after that fight, which opened the door for Tito to fight for the vacant title at UFC 25 against Wanderlei Silva. Tito dominated the first two rounds with his wrestling, but in the third, Wanderlei hurt Tito with a right hand, and the fight looked close to ending. But Tito survived, secured another takedown, and rode out the fourth and fifth rounds in order to win the UFC middleweight championship by unanimous decision. Tito's first title defense came at UFC 29 against Yuki Kondo. Kondo connected with a flying knee early, but Tito survived, took Kondo down, and finished him with a Cobra choke in under 2 minutes. At UFC 30, Tito faced Evan Tanner. After a brief exchange on the feet, Tito slammed Tanner to the ground, knocking him out in 30 seconds. At UFC 32, Tito defended his newly renamed light heavyweight title against Elvis Sinosic. It was another dominant performance from Tito, who took Elvis down and finished him with ground and pound before the end of the first round. Tito's next defense came at UFC 33 against Vladimir Matyshenko. Now, the fight went the full 5 rounds, but Tito controlled every round with takedowns and ground and pound, earning a unanimous decision victory. This win tied Tito for the most title defenses in UFC light heavyweight history at 4, setting the stage for a record-breaking 5th defense. And who better to challenge Tito for that record than Ken Shamrock, the founder of the Lion's Den and a former UFC super heavyweight champion. This was the rivalry of all rivalries, making it one of the most anticipated fights in UFC history. The hype was so big that it even attracted mainstream media attention, something that was actually pretty rare for MMA back then. And when the fight finally went down, both men started strong, trading shots on the feet. But Tito took Ken down and began battering him on the ground, leaving Shamrock visibly exhausted. The beatdown continued in rounds 2 and 3, and even when the fight was on the feet, Tito was the fresher, more aggressive fighter. By the end of the 3rd round, Shamrock's corner threw in the towel, giving Tito a record-breaking 5th title defense and saving the UFC from going bankrupt in the process. Now, after the Shamrock fight, there was talk of Tito fighting his friend and former training partner Chuck Liddell, who was the clear #1 contender. But Tito refused to fight Chuck, so instead he faced Randy Couture at UFC 44. Now, Couture, who had just beaten Chuck to become the interim light heavyweight champion, was seen as the underdog, especially since he was 40 years old. But Randy shocked everyone by dominating Tito from start to finish. For the first time in Tito's career, he was out-wrestled, and Randy's performance earned him the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship, ending Tito's 3.5-year title reign. Respect to Tito, though, he wrapped the belt around Randy's waist after the fight. Tito needed a win to bounce back, and he got it in his next fight, a highly anticipated showdown with Chuck Liddell at UFC 47. Tito was pressing forward more, but Chuck was landing the better shots and stuffing Tito's takedown attempts. Near the end of the 1st round, Chuck rocked Tito with a flurry of punches and a high kick, but the bell saved him. In the 2nd round, well, things got controversial. Chuck seemed to poke Tito in the eye, and although Tito was clearly affected, Big John McCarthy let the fight continue. Chuck capitalized, landing a barrage of punches that dropped Tito and ended the fight. Tito later confirmed that Chuck's thumb had poked him in the eye, causing him to see nothing but black. Despite the loss, Tito returned at UFC 50 to fight Patrick Cote. Although Cote dropped Tito early with a right hand, Tito dominated the rest of the fight with his wrestling, earning a unanimous decision victory. At UFC 51, Tito faced former UFC light heavyweight champion Vitor Belfort. In the 1st round, Vitor dropped Tito, but Tito recovered, took Vitor down, and then threw some heavy ground and pound. In the 2nd round, Vitor denied Tito's takedowns and landed some ground and pound of his own, but Tito secured another takedown near the end of the round and stayed on top. Going into the 3rd and final round, it was a close fight, but Tito's relentless takedowns and control on the ground earned him a split decision win. After the fight, Tito got called out by both Chuck Liddell and Ken Shamrock, who were sitting in the crowd that night. Tito made his return at UFC 59 against the Ultimate Fighter Season 1 winner Forrest Griffin. In the opening round, Tito immediately took Forrest down and started throwing elbows, cutting him open. Forrest managed to get up and land some punches, but Tito took him down again. Forrest showed incredible toughness, defending himself on the ground and surviving to the 2nd round. The 2nd round was much more competitive, with both fighters exchanging on the feet. Tito continued to throw punches, but he seemed to slow down as the round went on, and Forrest started to take over. Tito got another takedown in the 3rd round and held on to win a split decision. Tito then returned to the Ultimate Fighter Season 3, this time as a coach opposite Ken Shamrock. The season showcased Tito's coaching abilities and his rivalry with Shamrock. But that is also not the only thing that it showed. The reality TV show showcased the actual side of Tito Ortiz, the bad boy side, the side that made him into the meme he is today. Still, Ortiz and Shamrock would meet again in the octagon at UFC 61, and Tito dominated from start to finish. He took Shamrock down and finished him with elbows in the 1st round, winning the match by TKO. The fight was controversial, with many fans and Shamrock himself claiming that the stoppage was early. To settle the score once and for all, Tito and Shamrock fought again at UFC Fight Night 65. Tito once again took Shamrock down and finished him with elbows in the 1st round, this time leaving no doubt. Tito showed respect to Shamrock after the fight, bringing an end to one of the most heated rivalries in UFC history. After the Shamrock trilogy, Tito earned another shot at Chuck Liddell for the UFC light heavyweight title at UFC 66. The fight was a back-and-forth war, with both fighters having their moments, but in the third round, Chuck caught Tito with a right hand that sent him to the canvas. Chuck followed up with punches and the fight was stopped, ending Tito's hopes of regaining the title. Tito returned to the UFC in 2009, facing another former light heavyweight champion, Forrest Griffin, in a rematch at UFC 106. The fight was another close back-and-forth battle, but this time Forrest came out on top, winning a split decision. In 2010, Tito coached opposite Chuck Liddell on The Ultimate Fighter Season 11. However, due to injuries, Tito was unable to fight Chuck at the end of the season and was replaced by Rich Franklin. Tito's next fight was against Matt Hamill at UFC 121. Hamill, a former student of Tito's on The Ultimate Fighter Season 3, won a unanimous decision, handing Tito his third straight loss. Then Tito fought at UFC 132 against Ryan Bader, and in a shocking turn of events, Tito dropped Bader with a right hand, locked in a guillotine choke, and submitted him in the first round. This was Tito's first win since 2006, and it earned him a rematch with Rashad Evans at UFC 133. Despite a valiant effort, Tito lost the fight by TKO in the second round. Tito's final fight in the UFC came at UFC 148, a trilogy bout with Forrest Griffin. The fight was another close battle with both fighters having their moments. In the end, Forrest won a unanimous decision, and Tito left the UFC with a 16-11-1 record. After leaving the UFC, Ortiz signed with Bellator, where he enjoyed a late career resurgence. His debut against Bellator middleweight champion Alexander Shlemenko saw Ortiz's size and experience prevail, as he secured a submission win in under 3 minutes. He followed this up with a victory over Stephan Bonner, setting up a title shot against Bellator light heavyweight champion Liam McGeary. Although Ortiz did look good early in the fight, securing a takedown and maintaining top control, McGeary caught him in an inverted triangle choke to win the fight. Despite the loss, Tito continued to fight, most notably against Chael Sonnen at Bellator 170, where he secured a rear naked choke victory in what was supposed to be his final fight. Even though Ortiz won the fight against Chael, the verbal onslaught from the always popular Sonnen throughout the buildup is what the fans actually remember most from that fight.
Tito always says I'm using my mouth to get my opportunities. The only person I know that made money using their mouth is his ex-wife.
Well, just to correct you, I was never no marriage. You're a fucking punk, dude. That's what you call class right here compared to no class.
That was a nasty line.
No
by
class.
Me.
No class at all. That's why you see him with thongs and fucking jeans and a t-shirt. No class.
They don't call you the bad guy for nothing.
While Tito Ortiz's MMA career has been interesting, his life outside the cage has not lacked much entertainment either. In fact, his rivalry with his own boss, Dana White, is something that reminded people of Stone Cold vs. Vince McMahon from WWE's Attitude Era. So how did this beef begin? Well, you see, when Tito Ortiz made his MMA debut at UFC 13 on May 30th, 1997, back when Dana White was still teaching boxing aerobics in Las Vegas, Tito fought as an alternate in the lightweight tournament, stepping in and stopping Wes Albritton in just 31 seconds. Although he lost in the final to Guy Mezger, this debut marked the beginning of Tito's journey into the world of MMA. By 1999, Tito was on the rise, known for his brash personality and fighting skills. He secured a sponsorship from a porn company before his UFC fight against Jerry Bolander, sparking controversy in a feud with the Lions Den team. Tito's antics, like wearing a shirt that mocked Guy Mezger after defeating him at UFC 19, made him a polarizing figure in the MMA world. Despite losing a title shot to Frank Shamrock at UFC 22, Tito wasn't done. He came back stronger, forming Team Punishment, and eventually capturing the UFC light heavyweight title by defeating Vanderlei Silva after Shamrock vacated the title. And it was around this time that Tito Ortiz met Dana White through their mutual acquaintance, John Lewis. Dana was involved in boxing back then and became Tito's manager, known for aggressively negotiating on behalf of his fighters. Dana's tough approach worked, and he managed to secure a better contract for Tito. But even then, Tito had some reservations about Dana's methods.
There are probably two guys that absolutely tried to destroy the company at that time, and it was Tito Ortiz and Randy Couture.
Really?
100%, yeah. Two of the worst guys to ever deal with.
But you had a relationship early on with Tito Ortiz because you managed him.
100%.
So that went from sugar to
It did. It did.
And so when you were like, man, were you vocal about I hope he lose, or could we just tell? Did I miss something?
No, I don't think I was ever vocal about it.
Dana's negotiations with the UFC gave him an inside look at the organization's financial struggles. Seeing an opportunity, he approached the Fertitta brothers, who eventually bought the UFC and installed Dana as the president. Now this was a game changer, as Dana could no longer manage fighters like Tito, so he recommended his attorney friend James Gallo to Tito and Chuck Liddell. Tito, always a bit skeptical, still trusted Dana's recommendation, but soon Tito started feeling that his interests weren't being looked after, especially when it came to contract negotiations and some perks that he used to enjoy. When Tito headlined UFC 30, Zuffa's first show, and quickly stopped Evan Tanner, this victory didn't ease the growing tension between Tito and Dana. The UFC was struggling financially, and perks like private jets and luxurious suites were disappearing. Tito felt slighted and believed that the UFC wasn't giving him the respect he deserved as one of their top fighters. Things came to a head during an infamous altercation on a private plane. Dana White would later describe it as a fistfight, while Tito claimed that he manhandled Dana. Either way, it was clear that their relationship was becoming increasingly volatile. One of the most significant moments in Tito's career came at UFC 40 when he faced Ken Shamrock. The fight was a box office hit and played a crucial role in keeping the UFC afloat during a difficult financial period. But even that success did not smooth things over between Tito and Dana. After his victory over Shamrock, the UFC wanted to set up a fight between Tito and Chuck Liddell. Tito initially agreed, but then hesitated, citing their friendship and his need for better pay. Dana White, frustrated with Tito's demands, allegedly told him that without the UFC, Tito would be nothing. Chuck, on the other hand, was all about the competition and was ready to fight, even if it meant facing a friend. So this led to the creation of an interim belt, which Randy Couture won by defeating Chuck Liddell. Tito finally agreed to fight Chuck at UFC 47, a fight that would become one of the most talked about in UFC history. Tito was determined to prove his critics wrong, especially Dana White. However, Chuck knocked out Tito, solidifying his status as one of the UFC's top stars. For Tito, this fight was a turning point, not just in his career, but also in his relationship with Dana. After UFC 51, where Tito narrowly defeated Vitor Belfort, tensions between him and Dana reached a boiling point. Tito felt that he wasn't being valued enough and decided to play hardball in contract negotiations. Dana, who was growing increasingly frustrated with Tito, proposed that they settle their differences in a boxing ring. Tito accepted the challenge and the fight was scheduled for March 2007. However, the match never took place. Dana claimed that Tito backed out, while Tito argued that Dana was being unreasonable. The truth may lie somewhere in between, but the result was the same. Their feud continued. Despite their ongoing feud, Tito eventually returned to the UFC, losing to Lyoto Machida at UFC 84. The relationship between Tito and Dana remained rocky, with both men taking shots at each other in the media. The beef between the two escalated even further when it was announced that Tito Ortiz was set to face Chuck Liddell for a third time, this time outside the UFC under Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy Promotions. Now this got Dana as furious as we've ever seen him. Not only was this a fight promoted by two people that he absolutely hated in De La Hoya and Ortiz, but Dana was genuinely worried about the health of Chuck Liddell. Chuck had had a career downfall, the like of which we've rarely seen, something we've talked about in our other video on Chuck Liddell's career. And Chuck was a shadow of his old self, and he had lost the chin that made him the Iceman.
And Chuck Liddell and Tito are fighting. So what else you got?
Ooh, what do you think of that?
Not my cup of tea, but you know,
You're gonna watch it.
For sure. Well,
I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah, we'll watch it. Might do a fight companion for it.
Some people say it shouldn't happen. Right?
Oh no, I see. I don't think it shouldn't happen. I look at it more like if. I think if Chuck Liddell was still employed at the UFC getting paid $400,000 just to chill or whatever he was doing for the UFC, he would not be fighting. I think it's more of a money play, which bums me out. Because I think Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz, what they did for the sport, should be compensated for the rest of their lives.
But still, against all odds, the fight happened. As the two stepped into the cage, you could feel the tension, but Ortiz had something to prove. He came out strong, dominating the fight from the start, and in the first round, Ortiz landed a devastating knockout, putting Liddell to sleep and finally getting the win that he had been chasing for years. It was a moment of redemption for Tito, but many questioned if it was worth the risk. Tito was a pioneer of MMA, helping build the sport during its early days. However, his antics outside the cage and some of his promotional blunders have turned him into a bit of a joke in the online MMA community.